Happening here. This is The Rich Stevens Show.
Truth talks, bull walks. Time for some honest talk. The truth will set you free. Rich Stevens Show. See the light. Rich Stevens Show. Rich is right. Crank it up, turn it up. Rich Stevens on your radio. Crank it up, turn it up. Real news coming in stereo. Rich coming to you live. Rich Stevens Show. Yeah. Open your mind. Rich Stevens Show. Yeah. Rich coming to you live. Rich Stevens Show. Yeah. Open your mind.
All right, here we go. How are you? What's going on? I am Rich Stevens. Thanks for being here. I really do appreciate it. Two guys who had been helping President Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, investigate the Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden, and then introduce him to important people in Ukraine, supposedly, were arrested on Wednesday night as they attempted to leave the United States with one-way tickets to Frankfurt. This is the big story yesterday. Both had been subpoenaed to testify before Congress in the impeachment inquiry, and both, along with two other men, were charged with making illegal campaign contributions. Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman, who are both foreign-born U.S. citizens, set up a front company that apparently donated $325,000 to a pro-Trump super PAC last year. And they're accused of conspiring to circumvent the federal laws against foreign influence by engaging in a scheme to funnel foreign money to candidates for federal and state office, so the defendants could buy potential influence with the candidates. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. This is just... To me, it's amusing because they are throwing so much crap against the wall, hoping that one thing sticks, and so far nothing has. So supposedly, they donated more than the legal limit to a U.S. congressman in order to enlist his aid in ousting the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. And they also supposedly funded state and federal candidates to help them set up a recreational marijuana business in Nevada and a few other states. Now, this comes from the Wall Street Journal. So they say that they had several lunch visits with Giuliani before they headed to the airport eventually on Wednesday evening. And at a news conference yesterday, the FBI agent William Sweeney Jr. said that, quote, these allegations aren't about some technicality, a civil violation, or an error on a form. This investigation is about corrupt behavior and deliberate law breaking. I mean, sit down for a minute and think about this. What the hell is going on in Washington? Is everybody crooked and crazy, or is this just the Democrats trying to throw dirt against anybody and everybody associated with President Trump? I mean, this has nothing to do with President Trump. It's just another attempt to try to make him look like he's got something going on that he doesn't have going on. But you got to admit, whoever's writing this script is certainly keeping the thrills coming. That's the only thing that's amusing to me here, because every time it seems like almost, I guess over the last 2 or 3 weeks, something comes out and right away everybody is, they're just jumping up and down. And I got to tell you still, I was looking at the TV ratings, by the way, last night. CNN still at the bottom of the pile. And what's scary to me is the highest ratings go to Rachel Maddow on MSNBC. That is very scary because I think she's very scary. Just the way her opinions are. I don't have anything against her as a person. I'm just saying just the way her opinions are. And she kind of like talks to herself, which I always found very weird. I think I've watched the show maybe 3 times in my life. She'll say something and then answer it and then talk about it and come back and answer it again, which I think is kind of strange, just a little bit. Speaking of strange, this happened in Jersey. You might have heard about this. There was a middle school teacher, and she has been reassigned because she took a knee during the Pledge of Allegiance. Who does this? The decision to kneel was very controversial because parents in the community, the school in particular was named for Sergeant Dominic Pila, who was a local U.S. Army Ranger who was killed back on a mission in Somalia back in the 1990s. So the school board move the unnamed teacher who never explained her action into a position that didn't require her to be present and in front of students during opening announcements each morning. Why keep her unnamed? Why not say who she is? I mean, what do you get out of protesting the national anthem or the Pledge of Allegiance? Anything that you do that comes under either one, the national anthem or the Pledge of Allegiance, is going to obviously get attention because it's almost impossible to ignore. But, you know, it's so simple to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I don't know about you, but when I was growing up in the Bronx, we used to always say the Pledge of Allegiance. It wasn't any kind of big deal. And before you say, well, Rich, you know, those were different times. Yes, they were different times, but this is how we were brought up, and this is how it should be today as well. The whole thing with the, what's his name, Colin Kaepernick, that guy, with the kneeling crap. I mean, come on. And we're still talking about this. And, you know, he set such a bad precedence because now people think that they can do it freely and get away with these things. And there's so many stories. There was a story here in South Florida. I guess this was, I want to say 3 weeks ago, give or take. A principal at a high school in Boca Raton told, I think, I'm not sure if I have the facts right, but it was something to the effect of that he sent a letter or an email to parents saying something about that that the Holocaust didn't happen. I'm pretty sure that was the story. And of course, we know who he is now, and he's been reassigned as well. But how do you get away with something like that? And what does reassign mean? That means the same as when somebody's been suspended with pay, which is basically so-and-so is going to be put on vacation. That's always bothered me too. Somebody in a situation like that, or some of these stories that we hear about, they should be suspended without pay. And then if an investigation is done and they find out that the school board made a mistake, or whoever it happens to be, the company or organization or city or state or federal organization, if then they find out that it was, wrong, then they should back pay that person. But why would they take somebody and put them on a paid vacation? I mean, let's face it, that's what it is. Let's call a spade a spade. Reassigned or suspended with pay. It's a freaking vacation. That's always bothered me. Something else that bothered me is, and I know there's some people that are going to listen to this and say, Rich, you're nuts. You can say whatever you want. You know I don't care. I mean, I do care, but I don't, I'm just saying. There's a General Motors strike, and it's so funny to me how this really isn't in the mainstream media right now. And the reason is because they're so hell-bent on bringing down President Trump that they don't have time for real stories like this. The strike is at General Motors, and it's been going on for 4 weeks. Now, I got to admit to you, I watch, I read, and I listen to a lot of news from a lot of different sources every single day of my life. And I don't know about you, but I must have missed the General Motors strike because I didn't hear about it anywhere. But it's been going on for 4 weeks right now. And industry people on the inside are saying that GM is going to suffer income losses of over $1 billion if this labor dispute continues just through the coming weekend. And apparently, and again, to me, this is such a big story. I can't believe I haven't heard about this, unless I've just been living under a rock. The strike has shut down every GM production plant in the U.S., and a shortage of parts has slowed down operations in Mexico and up in Canada as well. And there's nearly 50,000 United Automobile workers at GM who are striking also, who are suffering, of course, having lost $624 million in wages so far. They're not getting paid. When you strike, you don't get paid. Now, this strike is the largest at GM since 2007 and one of the largest walkouts in the United States in, years. Why hasn't this been front and center on the news? I don't know. Last night, I called a friend of mine who lives in Michigan, where I used to live, and I said to her, what's the deal with this strike? She says, I know, it's on the news every 10 minutes. Well, why isn't it on the news here? Why isn't it on the cable news networks? Oh, because they're all bashing Trump every 2 minutes. And by the way, while we're talking about the news, I said this last year and the year before. This had to be the worst because it really pisses me off. I obviously wasn't here the other day in respect to Yom Kippur, the highest holiday, Jewish holiday. And the week before was Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. And once again, unless I missed it, I watch a lot of TV here in South Florida, both local and national. I didn't see any local networks wishing a happy and healthy New Year and or anything. Nothing about Yom Kippur. Nothing. Now, in New York, there was always a big deal. Or actually, let me change that. When I first moved here to South Florida, they always made it a point to wish well for the Jewish holidays. Now, all of a sudden, it's poof. It's like gone. It disappeared. So, I don't know, but it's not healthy and it's not good. But back to the GM strike. Sorry, I had to get that off my chest. The United States government doesn't like the strike either because the Treasury has lost about $300 million in tax revenue, and the state of Michigan has lost about $15 million. So imagine these people are out of work for 4 weeks already, and they're fighting. And there's some word that some Democrats in Michigan are going to try to get the government to step in and do a pseudo, what do you call it? What's the word I'm looking for? A pseudo bailout, like Obama did with General Motors a few years ago, which would be devastating to our economy. And it would also send a signal. Well, first of all, I know President Trump's not going to do this, but it would be totally devastating because that would give open rein for other huge corporations to have their workers just say, you know what, we're going to walk out. I mean, it's got to be a difficult decision to do this. If all of a sudden I said to you that we're not going to pay you for the next 2 weeks, no salary, or maybe a month, this is 4 weeks, could you even afford to live like that? Unfortunately, I'm going to guess the answer would be no, but that's, because people don't really know how to save like people once did. Or maybe I'm just different. I don't know. I always have money in the bank for a rainy day, as they say. Speaking of rainy days, Turkey continued its massive military push further into northern Syria overnight as they continue to pound Kurdish fighters in its offensive, which was launched just days after President Trump pulled out U.S. troops out of the country. There's people, well, mostly on the left, but there's some people on the right as well, that are very upset over this, that the president did this. And when I told you last week when we talked about this, we're talking 50 troops. He pulled out 50 troops to save their lives because he knew that Turkey was going to go in and start these attacks. Turkey says it hit 181 terrorist targets overnight. The death toll continues to rise. Tens of thousands of people have fled their homes. They fled their homes to nowhere. There's nowhere to go. And I feel bad for those people, but I'm just saying, where are you going? Nowhere. Now, Turkey claims that the operation to protect its southern border from terrorists, but critics argue the country is taking advantage of the U.S. pullout to slaughter the Kurds, who have been a key U.S. ally in its fight against ISIS. But as I said, the decision that President Trump made to remove these troops has been and is being criticized on both sides for the exact reason. The Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, insists the U.S. did not give Turkey the green light to attack the Kurds. That's the mainstream media throwing that narrative out there. The thing that Donald Trump has done and continues to do, and I think it's great, is he just wants to get the United States out of these endless wars, which end up costing us, our United States soldiers, men and women who are on the front lines, their lives. I mean, it's going on for way too long. And why do we have to stick our nose in everybody's business? He's the first president that's done anything like this. There's something going on in California that I'm glad it's not going on in Florida, I got to tell you. For my friends in California who I've spoken to about this over the last 48 hours, I just cannot believe that Pacific Gas and Electric, that's like our FPL here in Florida, the power company, or Con Ed in New York, is finally restoring power to some of the 750,000 California homes whose electricity was cut off on Wednesday so they can reduce the risk of wildfires. Now, I got to tell you, I'm right up the middle on this. It's very easy for me to sit here in an air-conditioned studio in South Florida and say, you know, this is good or this is bad, because thank God it's not happening here. I freak. I think it started happening in 2004. Never had a problem before. But when the power goes out, I'm like anxiety city. So now the utility company in California says it could take days, up to 4 or 5 days maybe, before all the affected customers are back to full power. You see, early on Wednesday, this utility company cut the power to over 500,000 customers in 22 different counties throughout California. And then they did another 250,000 customers in 10 more counties later on Wednesday. And since then, the power's been restored to about 100,000 customers. But Pacific Gas and Electric are keeping an eye on the weather, because if the winds die down, more customers can be returned to the power grid. But in the meantime, there are heavy winds, and there's already some serious fires in California. I mean, here's the thing. The reason they've done this is because that huge campfire last year that destroyed so many homes, they believe, or it was blamed on this electric company, Pacific Gas and Electric, because they had some electricity poles that were apparently blown over and sparked and caused some of the fires because of the heavy winds. And if that is the case, then they probably did the right thing in turning off the power. But what about the people who, you know, depend on electricity for things like oxygen and air conditioning? I mean, when you don't have any power, you don't have a phone charger. There are no stoplights on the road. You can't charge your electric, electric guitars. You can't charge electric cars. You don't have a refrigerator. And as I said, right now, besides and despite the fact that they have cut the power to hundreds of thousands of people, the fires are still raging. I mean, we're talking tornadoes, earthquakes, wildfires, hurricanes. There's always something going on that we just can't control. That's the way Mother Nature works. On a totally different topic, with this, by the way, did you see the rally last night in Minneapolis with President Trump? Was that the best one yet? They keep getting better and better. So here's the interesting thing with this whistleblower thing. And this one, you better be sitting down for this. Lawyers for this CIA officer whose whistleblower complaint helped, start the impeachment inquiry, have asked Congress yesterday, late in the day, whether their client could submit testimony in writing instead of appearing in person. Are you freaking kidding me? Now, the reason is because, obviously, concerns about whether the whistleblower could testify to Democrats and Republicans without revealing his identity, and fears that doing so would lead to it being publicly leaked and jeopardizing his personal safety. I mean, in something as serious as this, they want testimony in writing? Well, how does that work? Will they write back to him with the questions? Now, the Intelligence Committee, all of them, haven't responded yet to this inquiry of potential written testimony. But this would set such a bad precedence. And a spokesman for the House and Senate Intelligence Committees didn't respond to any requests or comments from media as well. Now, in other developments, and I told you something was coming, Rick Perry, the Energy Secretary from Texas, has been the latest person to receive a subpoena and they want him to produce by October 18th documents related to his interactions with President Trump and State Department officials and others. Now, the committees want info from Rick Perry about any role he played in conveying the president's wishes to Ukraine's president in matters related to the Ukrainian state-owned energy company. Now, the whistleblower's complaint, in case you forgot, or in case you've been living under a rock, is that President Trump sought to use the powers of his office to push Ukraine to investigate his Democratic rival Joe Biden, and that White House officials acted to conceal evidence of the president's actions. It said it drew from testimonials of several unidentified U.S. officials who expressed concern about the president's conduct to the whistleblower. I mean, this is just the kind of thing that it's just going to continue to go on and on. I don't think anything's going to happen except another millions of dollars of wasted money with this is what they think about this. These are what these politicians are doing. They're not doing anything else. They're just all focused on this. And nothing else is getting done. Finally, somebody in Silicon Valley has stood up and done something good. Facebook is refusing a request from Joe Biden's campaign to remove a video that President Donald Trump's re-election campaign bought advertising for. It's a video ad that says the former vice president nefarious dealings with Ukraine were absolutely true. Now, they say that the Trump campaign ad will stay on Facebook, and Facebook's head of global elections policy said, contending its decision, quote, grounded in Facebook's fundamental belief in free expression, respect for the democratic process, and belief that in mature democracies with free press, political speech is already arguably the most scrutinized speech there is. And they also noted that it does not use third-party fact-checkers to evaluate comments or commercials promoted by politicians, and insisted the video does not violate the company's policies. So the Biden campaign fired back at Facebook's decision and said this is unacceptable. What are you going to do? It's a 30-second advertisement. It's a great video, by the way. And it says that Biden offered Ukraine $1 billion to fire the prosecutor investigating a company which was affiliated with his son, Hunter Biden. Now, the ad repudiates that Biden for threatening to withhold $1 billion on loan guarantees from Ukraine during his tenure as vice president. Excuse me. Now, Biden, at the time, warned Ukraine without aid unless the country fired its top prosecutor from investigating into the natural gas firm at which Biden's son Hunter worked and served as a board member. And by the way, I don't know if I told you this, but that original salary, first it was $50,000, then we heard it was $80,000. It was actually $180,000 a month. That's what his son got. And Biden also wanted Ukraine to get rid of Shokin, that's Viktor Shokin. And Trump says, because he was investigating Burisma Holdings, the gas firm that employed Hunter. Now, the Trump campaign has already spent $8 million to run this video ad, while the Republican National Committee has thrown in another $2 million. So you've probably seen it on your Facebook somewhere. The Trump campaign has also posted the ad on Twitter, on YouTube. It's been on Fox News and MSNBC, in addition to reportedly being viewed more than 5 million times on Facebook. CNN has refused to run this ad. I think I told you about this last week, arguing it makes false accusations and makes assertions that have been proven false by various news outlets. Now, the thing that's so interesting about this, in the particular video ad, several of CNN's anchors are on the ad. That's why they turned it down. And it's actually very funny. Trump's 2020 campaign communications director blasted CNN for refusing to run the ad. And he says, and this is great, CNN spends all day protecting Joe Biden in their programming. It's not surprising that they're shielding him from truthful advertising, too, and then talking to other media outlets about it. So he goes on to say that the ad is entirely accurate and was reviewed by counsel, and CNN wouldn't even describe to us what they found objectionable. It's because their anchors are in it. This isn't a cable news channel anymore. It's a Democratic public relations firm. Boy, I could have thought of a better term myself. That's great. And while Trump calls attention to Biden's corrupt business dealings in Ukraine, the former vice president and 2020 presidential hopeful called on Trump to be impeached on Wednesday. I told you that yesterday. We all know where this is going. And it's going to be very interesting. Let's see, 1 week from today, I think it is. 1 week from today. Today's the 11th, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Less than 1 week. I thought it was next Thursday. I think it's the 15th. I'm losing track of days. The next Democratic debate, which is going to be very, very, very fun to watch. Listen, speaking of watching things, we all know that sleep is very important for physical and mental restoration, but there's so many more interesting facts about your nightly sleep that you may not be aware of. This is all news to me, and I always have a problem sleeping, so I want to tell you about it just in case you have a problem sleeping or know somebody else that does. There's science behind dreaming to the impact of an all-nighter on your health. This comes from an Australian company called the Goodnight Company, and they recently shared their top facts, and they didn't disappoint. So many questions come to mind when we think about sleep, and what they found may surprise you. So let me tell you some of this. If you stay up all night, you may as well be drunk. You may want to rethink that last-minute exam cramming, as not sleeping for 16 hours can make you behave as if you had a blood alcohol level of 0.05%. And according to health officials, a blood alcohol count of 0.05 to 0.08% is likely to make you at risk of impaired judgment and reduced inhibitions. Now, this fact has been backed up in multiple research projects, with one Australian study finding that after 17 to 19 hours without sleep, subjects' performances on some tests were equivalent or worse than that of a blood alcohol count of 0.5%. Now, response speeds were also found to be as much as 50% higher and slower, I should say, for some tests, and accuracy measures were significantly poorer at this level of alcohol. Wow. The second one is everybody dreams. Everybody dreams 4 to 7 times each and every night. If you can't remember them, you're not alone. Most people forget 90% of their dreams. According to Very Well Mind, common reasons for why dreams are forgotten include medication that suppresses REM sleep and sleep disorders. They say, as a general rule, dreams fade quickly after waking. The electrical signals and chemical signatures that constitute the experience of the dream may disappear as wakefulness ensues, I should say. That is what they tell us. I wish I could learn how to write so I could read my own writing. It is possible for elements of the dream to be recalled later in the day, maybe triggered by an experience that reactivates the same area of the brain that created the dream overnight. But they say it's more likely that dreams will be remembered if your state of REM sleep is fragmented. Alarm clocks notoriously interrupt REM sleep early in the morning. And number 3, shift workers are at increased risk of disease. According to the International Classification of Sleep Disorders, shift workers, the reason they're at increased risk for chronic illnesses and cardiovascular diseases and gastrointestinal diseases is because those who follow a schedule outside of the typical 9 to 5 tend to struggle with sleep disturbance and end up with shift work disorder, a sleep disorder, a circadian rhythm sleep disorder. And circadian rhythm refers to the 24-hour rhythmic output of the human biological clock, according to the Sleep Foundation. Now, it's considered a disorder because of the frequency which people suffer from sleep disturbances and excessive sleepiness in trying to adapt to shift work, I should say. So that's really scary stuff. So, tonight I'm going to try to go to bed a little earlier. Maybe you should too. I shouldn't be laughing. It's a serious thing. And as a person with sleep apnea, I take sleeping very seriously. It's just those nights when I can't fall asleep and you just toss and turn and toss and turn. Then you get up and you either get on the computer to try to make yourself tired or watch some TV. Sometimes it works for me. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes when I got out of the hospital last year, there were maybe 2 months that I literally didn't sleep at all, for weeks at a time. I would fall asleep during the day, in the middle of the day, because I didn't sleep at night, but I would literally just angry tossing and turning, trying to find a comfortable position to try to sleep. It was terrible. Finally went back to the neurologist and they gave me medications for it, and it seems to work, but it's starting to not work again, so I'm very concerned about it. Listen, I'm concerned about you too. I hope you have a great day. Enjoy this day. This week flew by again. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you again on Monday. Have a great weekend. Oh, the weather's going to be great too, so you got to love that. Thanks for listening to The Rich Stevens Show.